So Jimmy, the idea of Wikipedia, as we were just discussing a little earlier, it's kind of preposterous on its face, isn't it?
Absolutely ridiculous.
To have
It couldn't possibly work.
an army of volunteers create this open source encyclopedia that would be open and free to the world. Go back to 2001 when you were coming up with this idea, and just walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, so before Wikipedia, I started a project called Newpedia, which was the same vision, a free encyclopedia for everyone, but I didn't really know much about organizing an online community and all of that. And so we decided that in order to be trusted, it had to be more academic than a traditional encyclopedia. So to get anything published, there was a 7-stage review process. People actually had to fax in their CV to prove they were qualified. I mean, fax. I just gave a talk at NYU, and I was like, it was a lot of undergraduates. I'm like, fax, do you know what a fax is? It's like you send paper through the phone, you know? But anyway, so people had to fax in their CV to prove they knew what they were talking about, and and I knew that wasn't going to work when I tried to write an article. I thought, oh, okay, well, I had been in a PhD program in finance, and Robert Merton had recently won the Nobel Prize for his work in option pricing theory, which is what I had published on as a student. And I was like, oh, I could write that. And then I felt this enormous pressure because they were going to take my draft and send it to the most prestigious finance professors they could for critique. And it was like being back in grad school, which was a very unpleasant experience. And I was like, this isn't fun. Like, nobody's going to do this. And so, at a moment which I detail in the book, my daughter was born and there was a health crisis and I couldn't find much information online. And I was like, we really have to find a way to make this work. And so completely changed the model. They call it these days in Silicon Valley, they call it pivoting. We didn't call it that back then. I was just like, that's not working. Let's try something else. And started the wiki, January 15th, 2001. And then after that, it was kind of amazing because we had spent 2 years, online. It was an email list and a couple hundred people involved, and almost no work was getting done. But we had talked about an encyclopedia for some time. And so we just started in, and people started writing, and we had more work done in 2 weeks than we had in almost 2 years. Because people were suddenly free to go like, oh yeah, let's make stuff. Yeah. So
and for most of the early years of Wikipedia, I mean, there was really ferocious skepticism, right? I remember when I was in high school and college, teachers would often say, whatever you do not cite Wikipedia. If you copy from Wikipedia, we're going to know it. We're going to throw your paper out. No good. And now there's real trust. When people land on Wikipedia, most people are like, okay, it must be true. How did that evolution happen?
Well, so part of it is, just maturity, just like, I mean, there was a moment when you could be the first person to type, Paris is the capital of France, and hit save, and you're like, look at my amazing encyclopedia article. And it was terrible, And so a lot of the entries in the early days were really short and really very, very brief and didn't have sources and so forth. But we always had an aspiration to be, I always said, Britannica or better quality. And so over the years, it took some time to sort of build it up and get there, and to sort of get through that chaotic early stage. But a big part of it was the rules of Wikipedia. Quality sourcing. We have a and actually some of the early criticism was like, well, they're just against expertise. And I'm like, actually, we're really interested in expertise. We really think you should have a good quality source and not just write whatever random thing pops in your head. And so all of those elements, right, were things that were building trust that, even back then, I sort of put on my user talk page, you can edit this page, I trust you. So trust was always something we talked about. But then sort of looking back as we're coming up to 25 years of Wikipedia, realizing like, oh, we actually did a lot of things to build trust. It didn't just happen magically. You had to sort of do a lot of things. And then also, of course, like Wikipedia is still very, very trusting. Like anyone, 99% of the pages are wide open for editing, and you can just come in and you don't even have to log in. You just make a little change. I mean, people will monitor it and all of this, yeah.
So these volunteer editors are known as Wikipedians, right? And there's some who are kind of these power users, these like obsessives who are just updating and editing and adding articles really around the clock. You highlight one in your book, this like ultra marathon runner, right? Can you talk a little bit about him as a way of everyone sort of understanding who are these people? He's an atypical Wikipedian because he's so prolific, but he's someone who very much is in the mix.
There's a lot like him. It's funny because when you said ultra marathon runner, I'm like, oh, because that
could be so many of them. Yeah,
that's a minor detail to me about his biography. I only sort of
guess I'm a
vaguely
runner, so
know
that
that.
stuck out
Oh,
to me.
okay, that's what Doc James. So he's a doctor. He's a medical doctor, an emergency room doctor, who he was on the board for a while, a community member, edits Wikipedia. He does it in part, like one of the original motivations is just staying up to date on his field. Like he needs to stay up to date on emergency room medicine. And so one of the ways he does that is by reading the latest research and then incorporating it into Wikipedia articles. And he's part of a group, Wiki Project Medicine, that are, they're some of the most fierce people in Wikipedia, because this is one of the areas where incorrect information could be terrible. Like it's one thing to get the date of birth of a celebrity slightly wrong, although some of the celebrities get really upset about that. But I'm in LA, so you probably know. But the we have rules like you will not see in Wikipedia information, maybe in some cases, but broadly we don't give information about dosing. And the reason is, like, you get dosing wrong, somebody comes in and vandalizes and adds a 0 and doesn't get noticed, it could really mislead someone. So we're just like, no, we shouldn't really do that. It's not really necessary for the encyclopedia. We're not a medical reference book. And so they're really strict about all that kind of stuff and keeping out pseudoscience and all of that. And it's just great. I mean, he does it partly, started partly for the professional reason, but he could just study, right? And he just does it because it's just like part of his life. Is something great to do.
And over the years, you've had a lot of antagonists, a lot of critics. Obviously, the most prominent one being Elon Musk, who once...
Who?
Who once said, and you never know with Elon, because buying Twitter started out as a joke, then it became a reality. He always says things half in jest, half serious. It's hard to process him. I'm a journalist who covers him, so it's a lot to deal with, a lot to process. But he once tweeted out, that he would buy Wikipedia and change the name to Dickopedia.
Yeah. Well, he said, I will give $1 billion to Wikipedia if they change their name to Dickopedia. And I was like, should I respond? And I was like, I'll just let that sit there. Like anything I say, like he's made himself look like a fool. Like he's not a serious person. Like this is ridiculous. And actually, before this, a New York Post journalist had tweeted at him, like he was complaining about something, and he said, Elon, you should just buy Wikipedia. And I just replied and said, not for sale. And that went massively viral. We raised a ton of money off of that and so on. It was like, oh, 3 words, great, fantastic, but not for sale. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, we're a charity, so we're a nonprofit organization, and we're really passionate about what we do, and that's going to stay.
But like so many other centers of knowledge right now, whether it's universities, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's science, are really under attack in this political moment by the Trump administration. And Wikipedia has definitely been the target of a lot of these attacks, whether it's from Ted Cruz trying to open an investigation, others in the MAGA movement saying that there's a strong liberal bias on Wikipedia. How do you respond to these allegations, and do any of them have any merit?
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of them don't. There's a lot of things said on Twitter, or like Elon may say, and it's just like, well, that's not really correct. And then, other things, like if somebody says Wikipedia has been taken over by radical left-wing activists, I'm going to say, no, it has not. Like, I know the Wikipedians, they're a bunch of nerds. Most of them aren't particularly political. And if you say, but aren't there some pages that are biased? I'm going to say, yes, there are some pages that are biased, and we need to do something about that. Like, there's always going to be something in Wikipedia that needs fixing. And my view is, and sometimes the comms people get a little like nervous about me, but I'm like, one of the rules of trust is be transparent, especially when you have something to hide. And we could go out and say, no, Wikipedia is not biased at all. And if you think anything's biased in Wikipedia, that's because you're biased. We're completely neutral. No, I think we can say, like, pages sometimes get out of whack, and, things happen, and people are upset about something, and it goes one way and then the other. And what we have to do in our community is sort of be super dedicated to saying, okay, like, if we get an allegation like something's biased, we have to go like, okay, what do we need to do? How can we fix this? Do we need to fix this? In some cases, it's, if the flat earthers come at us, I'm just like, yeah, you know what? Like, that's not a thing. Yeah. And I don't care if you think we're biased because she's round, like that's just a fact. And it's not controversial at all. If it's a more controversial subject, it's like, oh, we probably should grapple with this and we should sort of be very careful. And, it's not always easy.
But when there is an allegation made against a particular article on Wikipedia, or if the subject of the article is disputing some part of it, part of the transparency mission of Wikipedia includes like having almost a headline of sorts to say, this is under question, this might have a bias. Can you talk about that as part of just telling readers, alerting them, hey, this is being disputed and we're looking into it?
Yeah, so I mean, it is quite famous wording. The neutrality of this article has been disputed. And so people see that. Another one we have is the following section doesn't cite any sources. And so if you're thinking about trust, you might think, doesn't that just diminish people's trust? Like you're telling people, by the way, this sucks, like how's that going to help with trust? But the truth is it helps a lot with trust because we're being transparent and people are like, oh, okay, like, yeah, they're warning us, like there's a problem here, something needs to be done. And, I always joke, I think sometimes the New York Times should put a little banner at the top saying, we had a big fight in the newsroom. We weren't sure, but we decided to go with this. But you should know, like, not everybody thought this was strong enough. That'd be great, instead of always being sort of the voice of God perfection, where we all know, some stories are stronger than others and the sourcing isn't always the same and that there's some controversy and so on. Like, that's just good. Like, be transparent. Like, tell us when you're not so sure. That's okay. And it would increase trust. Mm-hmm.
So in some authoritarian regimes, whether it's China or North Korea, Wikipedia, like many websites, I work at NPR, you can't access NPR in a lot of these countries, are behind a firewall, right? Mm. But in the US, because of the First Amendment, you'd think that Wikipedia would be pretty safe. But if you have a sort of cursory glance at headlines, it does kind of seem like Wikipedia, the walls are closing in on Wikipedia, that it's under threat. I mean, never before have you had sitting members of Congress, threatening investigations against Wikipedia over the idea of there being systemic liberal bias. Is it true that Wikipedia is under threat, and how will it survive if so?
Well, I mean, so there's a lot to unpack there. So, I mean, the first thing, we got this, frankly, crackpot letter from the federal prosecutor for the District of Columbia, the interim.
Ed Martin.
Ed Martin. He didn't get the job eventually. Just sort of really sort of hostile, and when we got it, and when I read it, I was like, it's probably a good thing that we now have like proper people on staff and so forth, because I would have just sort of, like, my answer would have been very short. Go fuck yourself. And they put a footnote to the First Amendment to say, like, this is none of your business. Yay. Got one supporter of the First Amendment here. But I didn't do that. Like, that's not our style, really. That was my first instinct, but obviously that would be foolish. Instead, we just gave a very boring answer. Things like, yes, as a matter of fact, we do allow foreigners to edit Wikipedia. We're a global website, and that's who, it was bonkers. And so there's a few things. So, one of the rules of trust is it's about independence. And so one of the things that's really important about Wikipedia is, so we're a charity, so we're a nonprofit, so we're not worrying about advertisers. We are not funded by governments. And I was very careful to check on this when Elon was doing his Doge. I'm like, we don't get any money from the US government, do we? No, we don't. Good. We're not funded by a handful of billionaires or anything like that. So we do have some major donors. We appreciate them very much, but they are a small percentage. The vast majority of the money that runs Wikipedia is the small donors. People giving an average, I just heard this number today, of it's like $10.63 a year. That's the average donation to Wikipedia. And there's millions of people who do that. And so that's really important for our independence. So, like whatever the government can make me come and testify before Congress, and that'll be fun. They'll have to really counsel me a lot to not say, go fuck yourself, Senator. I wouldn't be a senator. It'd be Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah. That's who I would say. But no, it's it's a weird time, but like they can't really do anything to us. Like there's some grumblings about revoke our nonprofit status, and it's like, well, you can't really do that, not on content-based grounds. And if you were going to do it on content-based grounds, gosh, there's lots of nonprofits that take quite ideological positions that maybe the Trump administration doesn't like, and surely they would be first, because we're like, and it's kind of weird that, we're an encyclopedia. And so like, why is an encyclopedia suddenly controversial unless, and this is the key, suddenly if the facts of reality are upsetting to people in power, then maybe an encyclopedia is controversial, and that's a bit worrisome.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about AI and how it's changing Wikipedia. Like so many news publishers like NPR.org and really the entire news media, since Gen AI has been everywhere, people are getting answers from ChatGPT, from Gemini, from Claude, and the rest, and getting what they need on their app or Google Gemini, and never going to the website, which is bad if you're a company that needs the clicks and the ad revenue to support your model. Wikipedia is obviously different, but often when I'm seeing ChatGPT and I'm looking at the sources, it's Wikipedia again and again and again, and there's no allegations of stealing there because it's all fair use, right?
It's all freely licensed.
It's freely licensed.
And fair use, yeah.
But talk about the ways in which the advent of Gen AI and everyone having chatbots have changed both how users are interacting with what's on Wikipedia and how it's been growing as an organization.
Yeah, so I would say the main thing is in terms of the traffic to Wikipedia, we haven't seen any major changes. So we just did report there's been an 8% drop in page views, but we've seen fluctuations like that in the past. And is that due to Gen AI or just the Google algorithm and the vagaries of the internet? Not sure yet, but it's not been massive. And one of the reasons, there was a Pew Research study that if you look at the top 10 links, the traditional search results in Google, Wikipedia is in the top 10 for 3% of all searches, which seemed quite low to me because we're there for everything I search for, but a lot of people aren't searching for information, they're searching for, cheap Nike shoes or something like that, and we wouldn't show up there. And so, but then in the AI summaries, we are linked to 6% of the time, so twice as often. But at the AI summaries, people click through a lot less because they got the answer in the summary that they would have gone to Wikipedia for. So net, it may not be impacting our traffic all that much. That's a good thing. We do think it's really important that the attribution, so one of the few requirements of our license is attribution. Also, just from an ethical point of view, we teach all kids, it's plagiarism if you don't cite your sources. So you should say where you got the information. And that's probably as important to us as anything else. We don't make money from page views, right? So we don't actually obsess over how many page views we got and time on site and all that kind of stuff that most internet sites would. But we do care that when you do see that banner, oh, actually Wikipedia made my life better. Actually, this is something I should chip in for because I use it all the time, and that's fair. And if people don't even know the information came from Wikipedia, then they probably are going to go oh, yeah, I used to use Wikipedia. I remember that. But now I just get all my information from ChatGPT. And it's well, where do you think they got it? They read it in Wikipedia. So we do, we think about that. But so far, not so much.
Do you worry about the erosion of the quality of information? Everyone who's used ChatGPT or any, LLM, large language model, has seen this idea of hallucinating, where it will state something confidently that is sometimes the exact opposite of what is true. And hallucination, it happens across all of the major chatbots. But this could happen with Wikipedia. It could pull something from Wikipedia and restate it, and in the transmission, it introduces errors. Do you worry about that? Yeah. How can Wikipedia do anything to fight against that? Like, have you guys thought maybe you should start your own chatbot?
Okay, again, a lot of questions in one. Just let's talk about the hallucination problem first, because I find it really interesting. So I use a lot of different AI models. I bought a really expensive laptop for the first time in years, because I'd normally just I just get on the internet. I don't really need a powerful laptop. But because I run local large language models on my laptop, so I need a very strong computer. And so I test them, and I'm looking for, do they hallucinate? And my favorite question, I always ask every new model, I say, who is Kate Garvey, my wife, who's not a famous person, but she is known to some extent. So she worked for Tony Blair. She was in Number 10. She's mentioned in all different books that have been written about the Blair era. And she promotes the Sustainable Development Goals and has been interviewed about that. So she's known a little bit. Like, you can find information about her online. And she's kind of in that perfect category where the AI kind of sort of thinks it knows who she is, and then it just makes it up. And it wings it. And it's always completely wrong, or not almost always. Actually, recently I got a pretty good answer, but it's generally completely wrong. It's also often very plausible. So once it told me that she set up a nonprofit organization, yes, she did, to promote women's empowerment in the workplace. Sounds like her, but that's not what she did. And then she did this with Miriam Gonzalez, who is Nick Clegg's wife. So if you know, Nick Clegg was the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, who was also then later the head of policy for Facebook. So I know Nick because of his work at Facebook, and also we live in London and all that. Oh, and our kids go to the same school, so I've seen them at school and so on. So we know them socially, and we've been to dinner and all that. And I showed my wife, and she's like, wow, like, that could have happened. Like, it's kind of plausible. Like, had they been sitting together several years back at a dinner party, and, they could have done that, and it didn't happen. But then my favorite is, I then ask, and who did she marry? And again, always wrong, always amusing. It's often people we know. And my favorite, so in the UK, everybody knows this name. In the US, I would say less so, but because of recent news events, when the ambassador to the US got fired for associating with Jeffrey Epstein back in the day. But anyway, it said to me that she married Peter Mandelson. And I was like, and we know Peter, but like, he was in the Blair government and so on, and he's been in the news a lot lately. And this is where it was very funny to me, because ChatGPT got very woke with me, because I said, oh, isn't Peter Mandelson quite famously gay? And then it said, it's not really appropriate to speculate about people's personal sex lives, and gay people can get married in the United Kingdom. And I was like, yeah, not really my point. But anyway, so that one may be a little less plausible. But it's generally people we know. It's political journalists or members of parliament or members of the royal family sometimes that she married. And it's sort of like, for me, that really shows you why at the current state of the technology, you cannot use large language models to write Wikipedia entries. They'll just get a lot of things wrong. So then to wind back around to your question, like, one of the concerns that I have is that it's now really easy. So we've had this phenomenon for several years of fake news websites. And I don't mean like Donald Trump, any news he disagrees with, he calls fake news. I mean actually like completely fake websites. And you used to have to hire people very cheaply to like write a bunch of useless content. And now you can just churn it out. And you could create a completely fake news site that's mostly plausible and is mostly regurgitating, and then it could have a few zingers and all of that. Well, so for Wikipedia, we're not that worried about that, because our community spends like unbelievable amounts of time and energy arguing about the quality of sources. Yeah. Like, we're really obsessed with it. And so there was an example from many years ago of a fake news site, and it was called the Denver Guardian. And, The Guardian, everybody's heard of the Guardian newspaper, and Denver's a city in America. It sounds like it could be a newspaper, and it looked like a newspaper. But for the Wikipedians, they would go, hold on a second, like that's not the name of the newspaper. In fact, we've got a list of all the newspapers and da-da-da. And so you can't really trick Wikipedians, like they're super obsessed about sources. But I worry more about, okay, what happens if some of your lower quality news outlets under financial pressure start to say, yeah, we're going to start using AI to help our journalists. And what if they lower their standards, and then a source that used to be good starts to be a bit wobbly? And the real danger is the plausibility of the errors. Like, it doesn't say, who is Kate Garvey? Oh, yeah, she was the first person born on Jupiter. Like, you would go, yeah, that's probably, not true. But if you say, oh, she started a nonprofit women's empowerment, even friends might go, oh, yeah, I think that sounds like Kate, And so I do worry about the broader quality of the information ecosystem. And then, obviously, there's one thing to fool Wikipedians or to fool journalists is hard. To fool randos on social media, not so hard. And so all of this sort of misinformation floating around it's not good.
But is one way to combat that to say we're going to build our own large language model, our own ChatGPT? You're seeing the Washington Post, for instance, has it's quite bad because it's in its early stages, but has a chat bot, and you ask it questions and it cites it's trained only on Washington Post articles. So some news organizations are experimenting with this.
Yeah, so we have a machine learning group who are looking into that sort of thing. And so a couple of things. So one of the developers just threw together over a weekend using ChatGPT. We wouldn't do it that way because we were quite obsessed about open source and not using proprietary things. But he just did a demo where he would first, you would type a question, and he would first ask the model which Wikipedia entries would be relevant to this. Then he would feed in those entries and say, now answer the question and only quote these articles and don't say anything else, and so on and so forth. You have to berate it a bit to do the right thing. And it was actually pretty good. It was interesting. So his demo question was, why do ducks fly south for winter? Right? A good question that, as a parent, you're going to get asked at some point. And, the day when you could just kind of bluff your way through, like being a dad, those are gone because the kids are going to fact check you, So you want to have a good answer. And, okay, you think, where would that be in Wikipedia? Like, there's no page called why, we don't have that kind of headline. It's like, oh, is there a page on ducks? Is there a page on bird migration? So it turns out there's some stuff in all of those. And so it was pretty good, but that's not something we're going to roll out because to do our own model. And we are also looking really more interesting to me is using this technology to support the community in their work. So not to write things for us because it's just terrible at that, but to give suggestions or ideas or help us check things. So an example, we do an annual conference every year called Wikimania. This year we were in Nairobi. It was great. And a French Wikipedian who I've known for many years, she said, oh, I don't have time to edit Wikipedia like I used to, so my hobby, I go into French Wikipedia and I find a dead link. And you don't need an AI to find a dead link, it's just 404 not found. And then I see what that link supported, and I go and find a new source to add to Wikipedia. It's very easy and so on, but it's time consuming. And I said, oh, do you think, what if we had a tool where, we find a bunch of dead links, you can do that quite easily, and then the AI figures out what it was supported and goes and finds you 3 or 4 likely sources. So you're not wasting your time searching, and you can just click and check, yeah, it's right, and then you can add that source. And she said, oh, yeah, that would help. I could probably get 10 times as much done. So that's okay, that's using the technology, because 10 years ago, there was absolutely no way for a program to say, this link that's dead is a footnote for this sentence. Now I need to go find something that supports that sentence. You couldn't do that. You could do some keyword searches. It wouldn't be very good. So I think that's exciting. Are there ways that we can help our community become more productive? And then other things we talk about the question of bias. Could we troll over Wikipedia constantly and look for pages, particularly obscure pages, which are more vulnerable to one person coming in and either maliciously or more likely they just have a narrow view of the subject and accidentally making a really biased page because they haven't really studied all the sources. And could it say, oh, this page, I found some other sources, it seems like there's a problem here, just to tell the community, just to go like, oh, here's a page that needs some attention. And that tool doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough that it doesn't waste people's time. And that might be great. You know, like, oh, actually, we can find all these obscure pages that seem problematic. That could be brilliant.
Can I ask you a question that might connect with people in LA? I'm often on a Wikipedia page of a celebrity, and it's the most unflattering photo of them I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
This often happens. Why is that the case?
Well, everything in Wikipedia is freely licensed, and so we don't buy photos from wire services or whatever. So it's whatever people happen to get. A friend of mine.
You must get complaints about this. Like, can you please change the photo?
Well, actually, this is a funny story. So a friend of mine is Jemima Goldsmith, a very glamorous person. And her Wikipedia entry was her showing up at a conference, holding her shoes, and she was completely disheveled. Like, it was the least glamorous photo of one of the most glamorous people. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm really sorry, we'll do something about it. She's like, actually, I kind of like it. She thought it was funny. And so eventually she sent in a photo, or somebody got a bit. And it was just because that was a photo that somebody just took a picture of her showing up at a conference. And it was like, she didn't know she was going to be, that the Wikipedians were paparazzi, you know. But anyway, so it's kind of funny. So yeah, that does happen quite a lot.
So in the early years, columnists were always writing about the funeral of Wikipedia, which was just around the corner. Lots of people were kind of hoping for that for its demise, right? But through all of the years, I mean, what was something that really surprised you the most as it became this huge global force on the internet?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's because we got better or because the internet got worse, but I think some of those same journalists are now like, oh my God, thank God for Wikipedia. They used to think, oh, this is crazy, this is terrible, but now they're like, actually, it's the only good thing we got left. That's an exaggeration, in my opinion. Somebody else said it, and I'll let them say that. But, you know, it's kind of, I forgot what the question was. I was just like...
As it has become this huge global website, like, is it the number of volunteers? Is it like, what really surprised you the most?
Oh, what surprised me the most? It's a good question. I mean, in the early days, I didn't know. So I am a pathological optimist, and I always think everything's great, and I really like people, and I think most people are really nice, and, you know, like, there's a lot of good in the world. And I saw online, and you can still see it in places and pockets, like people just being really generous with their time and very helpful, and all of that exists. And yet, of course, when I first set the website up, and like anybody could come and trash the whole thing, especially if there's only 100 pages, it wouldn't take you that long to kind of go through and vandalize the whole thing. And I would often get up in the middle of the night and go down and just check on the website, and then pretty quickly I saw like, oh, yeah, look, there's this guy in Australia, and when I'm sleeping, he's awake, and like he's looking after things, and that's great. And there's actually volunteers around the world who really are beginning to care for this thing that we do together, and it's our hobby, and we love it, and we're all going to take care of it. And so that was a little bit of a surprise. It wasn't that much of a surprise to me because I thought and hoped that could be the case, but it was a pleasant like, oh yeah, actually, you know, like people are going to look after this. I think another element, you know, there was a time when in the sort of the frenzy of the dot-com boom and all this, when you would see, you know, sort of think pieces speculating about the future and saying, well, the cities are going to empty out because now people can just work from home and you don't have to go and sort of meet people, so we can all move to the countryside and so forth. And then, I mean, COVID happened and we did sort of work from home for a while, but it never occurred to me in the early days, like, I'm going to actually have to travel all over the world all the time because I need to physically go and see people. And I mean, I just started back again post-COVID because we did just like live on Zoom for a while. And it's not the same thing as like being there in person and just actually seeing the person, the full bandwidth, if you will, of like hanging out and having a joke. Like for the Wikipedia community, the things like when we do local meetups or our annual conference, like it's really valuable in ways that are kind of hard to put your finger on, but it's just like friendships are formed that way, and like things that would be conflicts are resolved much more easily if you've hung out with the person and you realize they're a perfectly nice person. And online, that friction can be quite, I mean, it's part of why Twitter is so hostile, is because people aren't meeting each other. There's like random people yelling at you.
And speaking of Twitter, speaking of Elon, speaking of Grok and Grokopedia, unlike Grokopedia, which is using AI to write most of the articles, and in this AI moment, I'm assuming almost all of the new articles that are being submitted to Wikipedia, it's very manual. There's people actually writing, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
And do you guys have any rules against AI being used in some of the articles, like no ChatGPT, no this?
No, not that specific. I mean, so the community, so people are reporting we are seeing more like people, newbies coming in and doing a little bit of AI slop, as we call it.
What's up with all these M dashes? It's like, okay, it's
Yeah,
AI.
exactly. And so there's ways you can note it, and there's a certain style. And actually, one of the things I find people are starting to accuse other people falsely of like using AI, and it's like, no, I just know how to write paragraphs. So, but the that element of things is something that we don't want to make too firm a rule on, because one of the things that is true of Wikipedia is a lot of people, this is particularly true in English Wikipedia, because it's kind of the lingua franca of our time, a lot of the people who are working to contribute to Wikipedia don't feel that confident about their English. And they are using ChatGPT to say, they write a draft paragraph and then they ask ChatGPT to help with the grammar, or maybe not ChatGPT, maybe another tool or whatever. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's great. Like, if you feel a little uncomfortable and you wouldn't have contributed otherwise, that's great. You can do that. And then I think other people, depending on how technical they are, they're using it in other ways to sort of analyze articles and things like that. There's a lot of experimentation going on, not just at the Wikimedia Foundation, but because we've got quite a geeky community, so a lot of people are trying experiments and thinking about things. But we are cautious, and of course we're a community, so I'm trying to take the sort of central view and sort of like on average this is kind of where we are. Some people in the community are like, AI is the worst thing that ever happened, I don't want to have anything to do with it, and other people are like, actually this could be really interesting and amazing. So
one thing I like to do if I see a journalist with a Wikipedia page, because it's so transparent, there's a ledger of everything. You could see who created it. And I'm like, oh, this journalist just wrote their own Wikipedia page. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just like, it's a little narcissistic.
Yeah, not recommended. Yeah.
But can you talk about that as always have been in sort of a part of the foundational ethos of Wikipedia, that the ledger is public. If you're a researcher, if you're a journalist, if you're anyone in this room can go and see every single edit that's ever been made, the discussion about the edit, I mean, all of that is open.
Yeah, no, so you just click history at the top and you see like a giant list, and you can go back and, previous 500, and you can go back and see the whole history of everything. There are a few exceptions, so we do hide certain revisions or delete them if it's for legal reasons or for harassment reasons. Like if somebody posts Taylor Swift's phone number, like we would just take that out because that's ridiculous, like you don't need that. But broadly, there's stuff, it's like whatever's in there, it's in the past history. And that transparency is really important. And also for every page, there's a talk page. So if you're like, oh, I wonder why this says this, often you can go to the talk page and see a discussion about it. Or if there's no discussion about it, you can say, oh, hey, like this doesn't seem right. Like here's another source, like something's wrong here. And that openness and that transparency is part of what helps to build trust, because you say, okay, I can see how it's done. And if we hid all that and made it harder for people to understand where it came from, we would be, like damaging the way that people can come to understand us.
But it's the opposite of a social media company. If you're banned, or if you think you're shadow banned, that your posts aren't reaching as many people, you have no idea why. There's no way to appeal. It's the antithesis of that process.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, even things like, if somebody gets blocked from editing Wikipedia, which happens all the time. Somebody comes in and they start screaming at people, or they're posting spam, or they're being obnoxious in some way, attacking people. You can get blocked, and you can see who blocked you, and you can see the block reason, and you can appeal it, and then other admins can see and go, oh, like you probably shouldn't have blocked that person, and and like there's a lot of, we talk a lot, and all of that's really important because without it, and obviously there's some things that we have to do a little more confidentially. So we have a rule like around pedophilia, it's not okay to sort of casually have a conversation about whether this person is a pedophilia pusher because you get really close to libel, and like it's like we just are like, yeah, let's just do that a little more privately. But for most things, it's like, like, well, this user came in and they started cursing at people, and we can see that, and we're like, yeah, that's not what we do here. Please stop. And if you don't stop, okay, you're going to get blocked. And so it's, it's all transparent, and that's really important.
Have the lawsuits against Wikipedia gone up over the years? No.
No, we hardly have any. I mean,
that's
there's
amazing.
a handful. Yeah, I mean, mostly, I mean, most of that sort of thing, like the community is quite good and quite vigilant, and so, so we have one lawsuit. I'll just talk about it a little bit because the lawyers, whatever, but like in India, there's a news media organization that is suing us, accusing us of libel, but the article, we definitely stand by it because we cite like the European Union for saying that they print fake news and they're a propaganda outlet or whatever. Like, and we don't call them that. We just say like, oh, this is what the European Union declared in this report and so on. So we have some things like that that feel more like political attacks than anything else, and we fight it and we do what we can, and then in terms of blocks of Wikipedia, we're blocked in China, and that's a long-term thing, and there's a whole story about being blocked and unblocked and so on. Except for the most important thing is we don't compromise. Like we don't give in to censorship, and that's that, and you can block us, and that's that. We were blocked in Turkey for about 3 years, and we fought to the Supreme Court in Turkey, and we won, and now we're unblocked, and it was like a landmark decision for freedom of speech in Turkey. I'm very proud of that. And actually, I was in Turkey recently for vacation, because I love Turkey, and people there are like, oh, this is great, like, like, it's terrible that the government was just like banning speech they didn't like, and now they can't, or they're less able to. And it's still not a completely functioning country, but we played our part, and I'm really proud of that. And so this is why, partly I'm not that worried about the U.S. Like, bring it on, we'll fight you to the Supreme Court, and hopefully the Supreme Court remembers the First Amendment.
So do you think your optimism has only been enlarged by founding and seeing the success of Wikipedia? Because it's kind of the opposite of Tragedy of the Commons. These are a bunch of people getting together, self-policing pretty well for the most part. There are so many corners of the internet where this is not the case. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of corners of the internet where there isn't self-policing because, like, I call it the feudal model, which is almost everywhere except Wikipedia. There are a few exceptions, but it's sort of like the social media company sets the rules, and they hire the moderators, and they're the master, and you're just there living on the estate. And as long as you follow the rules, you'll be okay, and if not, whatever, bad things will happen. And Wikipedia is not like that at all. Like, the rules are set by the community, and it is a big part of this trust, is to say like, oh, it's just my nature. I trust people, but I also say, like, I trust you, and I hope you'll live up to that trust. And then people say, great, like, I am trustworthy, and I will do that. And most, social media, it's not like that at all. You're not trusted. You're just a user, and as long as you're not causing too much trouble, you're probably not going to get banned. But, it's like, it's a different kind of philosophy of how you do that. And I'm a big believer in, like, and I don't have all the answers because social media is very, very difficult. So one of the things that makes our community management easier is the purpose, Rule 3. Having a purpose, a clear purpose of, well, we're here to write an encyclopedia. And that means Wikipedia has never been a wide open free speech zone. So if you go to the page on Donald Trump and you go to the talk page isn't a place to come and just have a chat about Donald Trump. The talk page is about how do we improve the article. And so there's no box on Wikipedia that basically says, what's on your mind? And the problem and that's kind of, in principle, that's like every social media platform, including YouTube, is sort of a box where it's like, oh, show us your creativity, like, what's on your mind? And as it turns out, a certain number of people in the world have something really terrible on their mind, and they will post it. And then, we have a rule in the community, it's one of our oldest rules, no personal attacks. It's one of the foundational principles. And so the idea is you should treat other people with civility, and you should be kind, and you should, And of course, do we always live up to it? No, because we're human beings and human beings are messy. But we do have a culture that says, look, if you flew off the handle at somebody, you should probably apologize. And that's not possible in social media. And indeed, a rule that says no personal attacks doesn't really make sense, because people want to get on and sort of rant about whatever horrible celebrity did the horrible thing, and that's kind of part of that, and that's okay, I guess. But we don't have that, and we don't we really, really work in the community to say we should be collegial, we should be friendly to each other, we should don't bite the newbies, and sometimes for newcomers they do find it hard to edit Wikipedia because there's so many acronyms and we've got a lingo. And sometimes we're not as patient as we should be. And that's the thing I like to talk to the community about is remember when you were new and you didn't know what to do, and people will do something wrong. And then there's a great story in the book about Kaylana, Emily, who she started editing Wikipedia when she was very young. And her first edit to Wikipedia was vandalism. And instead of just getting blocked immediately, somebody came to her talk page and said, hey, that's not really what we do here. Please don't vandalize Wikipedia. And then she felt so bad, it wasn't a satisfying experience in the sense of haha, I vandalized Wikipedia. It's oh yeah, that wasn't really nice of me. That she became this amazing Wikipedian, and she decided to make amends. And she's gone on. She's one of the leaders of Wiki Project Women in Red, which is about, so in red means, in Wikipedia, if you link to something, a topic, and there's no article, then the link is red. I have to explain that. You used to see red links everywhere in Wikipedia, but there aren't that many left anymore because we've got articles on so many things. So the idea of women in red is women who should be in Wikipedia but aren't. And so she's founded this project, co-founded it, and they've done this amazing work in getting more women scientists in Wikipedia and so forth, and she's really beloved in the community and all of that. And it all happened because we assumed good faith. We said to her, hey, yeah, maybe don't do that. And she was oh, wow, I can't believe they didn't just yell at me.
Yeah.
Well,
and Wikipedia needs more women in red because 80 to 90% of Wikipedians are male.
Yes,
right?
yes. We are a very male and geeky community, which causes lots of problems. Our content, it isn't that the male Wikipedians are sort of aggressively sexist or anything like that. I guess some of them must be. There's a lot of people. But it's more people write about what they're interested in, what they know about. My favorite example to use is somebody did a study looking at people who've won major literary awards. And so novelists who've won major literary awards. And if you look at the length of the articles for men, they are longer than the length of the articles about women. And that doesn't necessarily mean more quality, but it generally does. It means they've got more sources and they've got everything. And so why is that? It's not because the male Wikipedians think, books by women, obviously not important, not interesting. That's not how it works. How it works is a lot of literature does have different people reading it and different audiences and different different genders and all of that. And so, the classic stereotypical example is hard science fiction. So an author who's written really technical science fiction and won a major literary award for that, probably the audience is a bunch of people like us, tech geeks and nerds and so on, and men. And other authors will be more read by women, and if those women aren't participating in Wikipedia, then our coverage of those books won't be as good. And so when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, which we get attacked for these days, as a lot of people are, I'm always very clear to say, this isn't some affirmative action woke nonsense. This is just super practical. We want the encyclopedia to be good. And frankly, I think most DEI initiatives are also just super practical, but that's a whole thing that we can debate about in society. But in our case, it's no, actually, when we say we're interested in diversity, we are not just talking about gender, we're also talking about we need more people who speak Swahili. We really do. We need to be in every language. We need more people across sub-Saharan Africa, India. We've got active projects and we need to grow them, and they are growing, and that's great. And so we, the original vision for Wikipedia is imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. So that's what we're doing. So that means we are inherently global. We are inherently about thinking about who's not represented, who's not here, who are we not providing knowledge, or who are we not getting knowledge from? People who know things we don't know, and all of that. So yeah, I can get quite ranty about this, but it's just really near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to take some audience questions.
Great.
Now.
Hey, Jimmy, good to be here.
Thank you.
Your personal opinion, top 4 to 5 major issues that the world will be facing in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, all the usual suspects, war, climate, is AI going to be? Yeah, I think it will be a major issue in good and bad ways. I think it's going to be important. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are predicting, and I think with good reason, is some pretty rapid changes to the workplace. Certain jobs are going to go away, and other jobs are so one of the ways I talk about this is okay, we're getting really close nowadays. So we're thinking of large language models a lot, but another element of AI is driverless cars and the autonomous vehicles, which are going to be an amazing boon. We're going to see a massive drop in the number of fatalities, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the side effects is going to be, in the US alone, there are about 2 million long-haul truck drivers. And long-haul truck driving in the US is one of the easiest for computers to do, because the interstate highways are quite wide and big, and even if you need a human to navigate the last mile, that piece. So those long-haul truck drivers, those jobs are going to go away. How quickly, I don't know. And we have quite strong trucking unions. There has been a history of violence in the past. These are mostly men who may not have, and nobody's investing in retraining them. They may not have really good job options otherwise, and they're going to be unemployed. And that's going to cause some turmoil. That's going to cause a lot of problems. Another example, and I don't know the numbers on this one, but there might be 2 million, junior attorneys are facing a lot of threat, because a lot of the paralegal, the basic work of a junior attorney who has to read 700 pages of contracts, can be automated. Not all of it, of course, and the more senior partners and so on, and the deal making and all the things that lawyers do. And if you think 2 million unemployed truck drivers are dangerous, let me say 2 million unemployed lawyers, we're going to have a real problem on our hands. It's a joke. Few people laughed, but anyway. No, but I think we will see some substantial changes in the job landscape, and the point is some of those changes are going to be in areas that are going to surprise us, or maybe we're just beginning to see the shape of it. Because, if you had asked 30 years ago, if you'd asked me, what will the first, AI or near AI, what will it be like? And I think most people would have said, oh, it's going to be really fact-based, it's going to be quite mechanical, it's not going to have any creativity whatsoever. And it turns out, they're terrible at facts, they're pretty good at brainstorming and coming up with crazy ideas. It's kind of the opposite of what we thought. And, a lot of, I use, helping my daughters, I do some tutoring at home and so forth. And as a part of it, just to encourage them along, I like to make silly cartoons, really dad stuff, And one of the problems I made up, a math problem for my daughter, it was they were all so boring, and I'm I'm going to make you some math problems. And one of the math problems I made was, it was about the weight of a person, and I used Shaquille O'Neal and her sister. Shaquille O'Neal, quite large, sister, quite small. And I did this, and then when she finished and did her day's work, I gave her a certificate and award, and it was a cartoon of Shaquille O'Neal giving her an award. And I could not have done that 5 years ago. I can't draw Shaquille O'Neal. I can barely draw a house with a little, like a kid, a stick figure. And that's cool. And that's I'm just wow, who are people who are maybe graphic designers making silly ads for local businesses or whatever? Anybody can do this now, and we don't actually need that anymore. And that's the category of job where technology is replaced. And I don't think anybody would have predicted that exactly, coming up with a creative idea Yeah. So it's going to be something we have to deal with. One of the major issues, yes.
Hi, at the beginning when you were talking about the origins of Wikipedia, you kept saying we. Who was the we, and where did the money come from, and what was your background that got you into this?
So I had a little internet company, and we had a little search engine. We did some early blogging and things like this, and we were, somewhat successful and not massively successful. And I didn't know anything about raising money from venture capitalists and so on. So, we were just plugging away. We did, at our height of success, we did a deal with NBC television. At the time, they had NBCI, which was like NBC Interactive, and they were going to compete with Google. They were like, oh, we are a big media company. We're going to have a portal and so on. And so we actually moved our website to be a part of their website, but they didn't buy us. And they bought all of our inventory. So that was it. And it was like really good money because this is before the dot-com crash. Then the dot-com crash started to happen. And NBC realized they were losing like $100 million a quarter. And they're like, yeah, let's stop. So they just stopped immediately. And so then we lost that funding. And so so I hired Larry Sanger. He was the editor-in-chief of Nupedia, had a few programmers. But the we I'm mainly talking about is the early community. And so these were people who were interested in Nupedia and then carried over into the Wikipedia days, and then new people started to find out about it. And so the we that I'm really talking about is just like the first Wikipedians. Actually, I don't know what, this is a completely random story. It just popped in my head. I just love the story. So with Russian Wikipedia, so we started launching a bunch of languages. So we started Russian Wikipedia, and some people started editing, and I wasn't paying much attention. And then it sort of got abandoned. It kind of fizzled out. And then a new group of people found it eventually, and they came. And at the time, on the front page, it said Russia is the fatherland of elephants. And they had no idea why. The prehistory Wikipedians had put that there. And so it's like a thing they know in Russian Wikipedia. It's like this funny thing about Wikipedia. I don't know, it's more funny to me than the rest of you, but I liked it. Okay.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hello.
I liked Bobby's question about how people have asked if you might develop an LLM specifically for Wikipedia. And I was wondering, as arguably one of the few bastions of remaining like truth-seeking and trust-building like free speech places, sorry, not free speech, but do you think that it would be good if other LLM companies were to like follow that if you did create your own LLM, or do you think that might tarnish your trust?
So, I mean, it's interesting. So one of the things about creating our own LLM is like training a foundation model, training our own LLM from scratch. It costs a fortune. There's a reason why NVIDIA is so profitable, because people need to buy their GPUs and so on. So we don't have the financial capacity to spend 300 million. Like, we don't have 300 million, and that wouldn't be a good use of donor money. Could we, there's a lot of open source models now. Interesting, a lot of it are being released by Chinese companies. Could we take an existing open source, freely licensed model and fine-tune it, retrain it for our purposes? Yes, maybe, and that doesn't cost nearly as much. And then I think the question was sort of about working with some of these companies. And so the funny thing about us is we're very vendor neutral, and we're very passionate about open source. So, I remember one time I was giving a talk at Harvard Law School, and one of the students asked me, they're like, well, Wikipedia doesn't seem to have any real direct competitors. Do you think you would ever have any antitrust problems? And this is at Harvard Law School, a law student. And I said, yeah, well, I think probably we will, and probably what they should insist is that we give away all our content for free, give away our software for free. We just give everything away. I'm not sure, we're not doing anything to be a monopoly, whatever. Yeah, you can punish us by saying, no, you've got to share all your code. So all our software is open source. Anybody can make a clone of Wikipedia and start it, and some people have tried and so forth. But we are very passionate about that, so we don't really like to lock in with any one vendor. We don't want to sort of use proprietary tools. We're really about open. In fact, our machine learning group is working with a company that does open source models and things like that. I don't know the details of what they're doing, but like I was like, oh, good. Like it's fine if for experimentation and stuff. Like I use ChatGPT to experiment on my little silly ideas about, oh, maybe I could write a script to fix something. But like for production use and at scale, we need to be independent because there's so many potential problems. And even, like basing on a Chinese released open source model, you do want to think about like those models have some censorship issues and some of them are really, really good, but they are a little funny about certain issues, as you can imagine.
Speaking of ChatGPT, I entered in here, what is a good question to ask Jimmy Wales?
Okay.
ChatGPT suggests, what lessons have you learned about large-scale online collaboration that it could apply to how we govern society?
Oh, wow.
It's not broad enough. Go broader.
Yeah, that's a pretty bog standard question. Ask it to come up with a funny question.
If you could redesign Wikipedia's community governance model from scratch today, what would you do differently?
Oh, I mean, not much. Not much. I would say, when I think about what would be interesting to maybe think about changing, one of the main things is it's become very hard to become an administrator in English Wikipedia. And we need more admin. So it's one of these funny things. We try to make decisions by consensus. We really don't like voting and so forth. We really try to get as many people on board and so on. And we have this weird problem. We've been stuck here for a long time, which is if you ask a lot of really active Wikipedians, really active administrators, do we need more administrators? They will all say yes. And if you say, well, how should we go about doing that? What should we change to get more administrators? You'll get 10 different answers, none of which has even close to a majority. And so we're kind of stuck. Like we don't know how to fix it, but we know there's a problem. And that's something that, maybe we should figure out a different mechanism for making that kind of decision. I mean, the main mechanism is somebody's going to have to get up the energy to like do a whole series of town halls and things within the community and figure out something that and build consensus around a few options, and then we have a vote and something like that. It's a lot of work, and it hasn't happened yet. So that's an example of when I think about, like one of the things I like to say about Wikipedia, and we talk about the history and like how did it become more trusted, is we were never as bad as they thought we were, and we're not as good as they think we are. So from our perspective, like there's a lot of problems. Like we've got a lot of things that need fixing in Wikipedia, in the content, in the governance and all of that, while also acknowledging like we're quite proud, like we don't suck, we're not terrible, we're just not as good as we want to be. And I also think we better, like, you always have to keep that spirit of like, oh, like, how can we do better? Like, we know we're not perfect, so how do we fix this problem? How do we get more admins without lowering the quality of adminship and things like that?
About the title of your book, what are the 7 components of trust?
Oh, you have to buy the book. I can't give you all the secrets. And I also, it's terrible. I haven't memorized all 7. I need to. My collaborator, Dan Gardner, is like, yeah, you're going to have to know them off in order by heart. And I'm like, I'm too scatterbrained for that. So maybe instead I'll just say, what's my favorite, which changes all the time. And one of my favorites is, I think the chapter title is, Your Mother Was Right. And the rule is about civility, treating other people with kindness, and why that's important and why that's positive and productive. And your mother was right. Be nice to people. We teach it to toddlers. Somebody needs to teach it to Elon Musk. Yes, you can applaud now.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hello.
Leela and Jacob Rogers at the foundation are conducting research to improve new editor retention. Considering Wikipedia's values of, as you use the word civility, as well as inclusivity, how can the 7 rules of trust be applied to creating a more welcoming environment for new editors who may feel discouraged by a lot of veteran editors who express frustration on talk pages about newbies?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, the research is really important. So we have our research team, and one of the things that they look at a lot of things, but one of the things that we think is really important is new editor retention. So when people come to Wikipedia for the first time, what's their experience and do they stick around? And when they don't stick around, why not? And sometimes it's just like, oh, well, I just wanted to fix one thing and I wasn't really interested in going to Wikipedia. And other times it's like, well, this happened to me. And the story of what happened to them is really important to think about what went wrong. And I do think a lot of the 7 rules of trust are really important to remind ourselves. I hope a lot of Wikipedians read the book, and I think many of them will. But to say, like, okay, like, one of the things that we know works, which I've talked about with, like, Kaylana, is, you know, assume good faith. Like, somebody comes in and they're not doing a great job. Don't assume the worst of them. Be helpful. Be kind. Be so like, oh, let me show you something. Like, here's how we do this. Here's how we do that. And some of that, a piece of it is not just about civility. That is a big piece of it. Some of it is about things like we've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of acronyms and like a lot of communities. We throw a lot of jargon at people, and they're like, I don't know what that means, you know. So like people say, there's essays where people have written sort of policy essays and things like that. They're not rules, they're just guidance. But people will throw them about like, oh, but this is a WP:BLP issue. And people are like, I don't know that word. What does that mean? And you can click and read. One of the things that I think is interesting is sometimes our transparency can be not as transparent because there's too much of it. Mm-hmm. So one of the ideas I mentioned in the book is the idea of like, you know, maybe AI could help us come up with concise summaries of things, of like, you know, like, oh, I'm interested in this page and I see there's like an archive of 20 discussion pages. I'd sort of like to know what's been discussed before so I can find out an answer without having to bother people. But like, I don't have time to read 20 long diatribes and pages of people discussing something. So summary. So I think thinking about things like that, like really, and some of it is like really basic, like internet-y stuff. Like, you know, like new user retention is a very common question for all websites. It's like, oh, you got a new user, they fell off. Like sometimes it's in e-commerce, like, oh, they put it in their basket and they never checked out. Why? That kind of research, which is really more about, is the website helping people? Like if I click something and I end up at a spot where I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, a lot of people just go like, okay, well, I think I'll just go watch a YouTube video instead, you know? So I think it's a lot of pieces of it, and I think it's really important because one of the things, we had one of our donors years ago was a guy who, he was really, really keen, and he gave a really great example that's always stuck with me. He's like, you don't want Wikipedia to become like ham radio. So ham radio was once the province of mostly like young, geeky men and so on. And now, partly because the technology's moved on and we don't, I mean, the only time people remember we need ham radio operators is when all the services are down in a hurricane or something. But now it's a hobby that mainly older people are doing, and young people don't go, yeah, I'm going to get a ham radio and I'm going to put an antenna in my yard. And it's a hobby that's lost, and it's like, if the Wikipedians are all growing old together, and we talk our way and we do our thing and we're concerned with our friends and this and that, and we forget, like, actually we need some 18-year-olds. Like, we need young people coming in to replenish our ranks, to make sure we're not, you know, sort of just being boring and like not covering things they're interested in and so forth. That's really important. And so, yeah. So I don't know if I've answered your question really, but except that I think it's super important.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.